All right, great. Welcome everyone to this meeting of the Northern Middlesex Metropolitan Planning Organization. We'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. If you go to the next slide, I believe the first item, first is notice of non-discrimination. Do you want me to read that real quick? So I'll just read this off, stating that you are invited to participate in this transportation planning process regardless of race, color, national origin, including limited English proficiency, religion, creed, gender, ancestry, ethnicity, disability, age, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, veteran status or background. So the agenda for today, shown here as the first item, is just welcome and introductions. So we'll start with a roll call of members present. Who will be calling the roll today?
Derek, Kelly Linema from Northern Middlesex Council of Governments, and prepared to call.
All right, sounds good.
Derek Cravat.
Yep, Derek Cravat here, representing MassDOT Secretary and CEO of MassDOT, Monica Tibbetts-Nutt.
Thank you. Brian Fallon.
Brian Fallon, representing Highway Administrator Jonathan Gulliver.
Jane Wellman.
Jane Wellman, Chair of NMMPO, and Vice Select Board Member. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Pat Wojcik. Here. Tom Bomo.
Present.
Karen Puglia.
Here.
And Daniel Rourke. I don't believe Daniel is here, and I do want to acknowledge we have some federal partners here with us today. If you could, I don't know if you want to raise your hand so we can acknowledge you participating in this meeting as well.
Hi, all. Joshua Barber here with Federal Highway Administration, Massachusetts Division Office.
Yeah, and Brandon Burns with FTA Region 1.
All right, Brandon and Joshua, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. So roll call.
All right, thank you, Kelly. Before we move on to the next item, I want to just pass it over to Jenny to make a quick announcement on staffing.
Thank you, Derek. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Great, thank you so much. I just wanted to give everybody an update on the transportation planning program at NMMPO, and to say that Kelly Linema is, who you obviously have all met previously and see here today. She is taking over she will have oversight over all MPO activities and coordination of transportation planning programming, including studies, analyses, coordination with our municipalities, interlocal coordination and communications, interstate. There's so many different ways that we coordinate. And of course, working directly with Derek Cravat, Derek Schuster, Miranda, and other partners to make sure, and the LRTA, of course, to make sure that everything goes smoothly in our transportation planning process. This is part of her role as Deputy Director. She's not changing her role in any other way other than taking on the additional responsibility of the oversight of this contract. And so that means also that working with District 4 or any other local, I don't think there's necessarily anybody here today, but local engineers or DPW directors, those who are our primary tip contacts, all of those folks, Kelly is the main point of contact who's coordinating oversight of all of those activities. And I just want to say to all of you, as I told the council last week and our staff, I couldn't be happier that she is going to be in this role. She has skills and expertise and capacity, and most importantly, leadership to be able to move forward with very robust long-range planning activities, and of course, all the things that we need to accomplish in the short term, and be responsive to all of you and the things that we need to do in the future. So with that, I'll put it back to you, Derek, and just say thank you again. And I don't think I have anything else to say, so thank you.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Jenny, and glad to hear, Kelly, you'll be more officially in this capacity, and certainly know we're all in good hands there. So looking forward to continuing the work with you on the planning front. So thank you. With that, we can move on to the next item, which I think is the open forum for public comments. Is there anyone present that would like to make a comment? I see a hand from Andrew Jennings. Go ahead.
Good afternoon. Back in 1997, NMCOG and the MPO was instrumental in getting the North Billerica Station rehabilitated. And since the MBTA took over responsibility for that station in 2021, maintenance has deteriorated. There are now even more windows that have been boarded up. I know, Jenny, I've talked to you and you're trying to find the historical materials to help us out, but anything that people who are currently here recall about that negotiations and what they can do about the maintenance of the station would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Andrew. Jenny?
Thank you, and thank you, Andrew, for that. And I did forward along your email request to Derek Cravat, and I believe the matter was being researched with the real estate team and maybe others who have some historic data and information about this particular request. And I just wanted to make sure that that was clear, that I did forward along that question, and as far as I know, it is being looked into.
Yeah, thank you, Jenny. Yeah, we did receive that and passed along to MBTA staff. They have staff dedicated to, they call it rail transformation. So they work on commuter rail issues and things like that. So certainly this is a good reminder to follow up with them on that, because yeah, I had not had luck hearing back yet, but I will stay on it. We'll certainly try to get a good answer for you, Andrew. So any other comments? All right, seeing none, we can move on to the next item. I don't know if you want to put the slides back up with the meeting information. I have the agenda up here as well. So I know the next item is the meeting minutes. Does anyone want to make a motion and second to approve the March MPO meeting minutes for March 27th?
Make a motion to approve.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right. Made by Pat and seconded by Karen. Any comments or questions on the minutes?
I have one comment, Derek.
Oh yeah, go ahead, Justin. Yep.
I just noticed that Derek Schuster was listed as a voting member. Did they promote you, Derek?
Not yet, Justin. Good catch.
Okay, I just saw that flash across the screen there.
Okay. Yeah, I think that was the last month we had the secretary chair, I believe, right? So yeah. So yeah, we can correct that in the minutes then. Any other comments or questions? All right. So motion being made and seconded, and with that correction, go ahead and call the roll, Kelly.
All right, Derek Cravat,
Yes.
Brian Fallon,
Yes.
Jane Wellman.
I'll abstain since I wasn't here last time.
Okay, Pat Roches,
Yes.
Tom Bomo,
I'll abstain. I was not at the last meeting.
Karen Pulio,
Yes.
roll call, approved.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Move on to the next item, which is, I think, a status report update on transportation projects in the region. I'll turn it over to District 4.
Hello, Tim Paris, District 4 Planner. We just have a few items this month. The project 612658 Tewksbury Bridge Preservation, I-495 over Route 133 and Route 38. That project, the construction has begun. It's 15% complete so far. 610719 Burlington to Tingsboro pavement preservation on Route 3. The add date has been revised. It was moved up almost 2 years, a little more than 2 years. 608861 Westford Bridge rehabilitation, Stony Brook Road over Stony Brook. That one also, the add date was changed, moved back a year. 609-510, Drake and improvements at George Inglesby Elementary School, a Safe Routes to School project. That one also had the add date changed, moved back a year. 609-250, Billerica intersection improvements at Boston Road, which is Route 3A, Lexington Street and Glad Valley Road. We received the final design plans for that. And 609-035, Westford rehabilitation of Boston Road. The add date on that has changed, but just by a couple of weeks. And that is all we have this time.
All right. Thank you, Tim. Any questions for Tim? All right. Seeing none. Any update from LRTA on TIP projects or otherwise?
Sure, I can give some updates. So we have our automatic vehicle location, automatic passenger counter project, which is ongoing. Just an update on that. Everything should be installed on our fixed-through buses by the end of May. And at that point, we'll go into testing of the entire system and are looking to have that project online by the start of the state fiscal year in July. Another project, an update on our low-no grant award. We actually received our first 35-foot hybrid fixed-route bus. It was just delivered. So that project's moving along as well. And we also have received 2 vans for 2 of our councils on agings, one in Carlisle and one in Westford, and those are being delivered to those communities as well. So those are my updates for this month.
Great. Thanks, Justin. Any questions for Justin? All right, move on to our next item, which is an amendment to the fiscal year 2024 to 2028 Transportation Improvement Program. Turn it over to NMCOG staff.
Sure. So good afternoon. My name is Blake, transit planner at NMPO. So what is before the NPO board for this instance is a vote to release Amendment 3 to the federal fiscal year 2024 to 2028 Transportation Improvement Program. Amendment 3 involves a change with one project. That's project 609035, the rehabilitation of Boston Road in Westford. This change involves a increase of cost for this project from about $10 million to about $15 million. So that's an increase of about $5 million. And I will defer to MassDOT on the details of the reasoning and story behind the cost increase. However, we have been informed by MassDOT that the primary reason for the increase in cost is a need to widen the pavement in a few locations to facilitate one-way alternating traffic during utility work. Please correct me if I misquoted MassDOT in that. And so any questions from the NPO board on this amendment before we vote?
Thank you, Blake. Any questions?
I have a question on the review that we just had from Mr. Paris. On that sheet of paper, it shows the total contract cost to be over 16,249,000 versus 15,093 here. Is there a reason that's different?
So it's the Westford project, you'll notice the cost here is a little different than what's included on the slides. So total contract cost here is 16 million. On the next slide, shown as 15. That's correct. That's your question?
Yeah, that's my question.
Thank you.
Why are they different? Yeah.
So the sheet that District 4 reads off of doesn't take into account program tip cost until an amendment's already happened. So that's possibly where part of the discrepancy lies. That said, the contract cost for a project and the total federal participating construction cost are not one and the same necessarily. Sometimes projects have non-federal participating costs associated to them. I don't know if the district has any more input on why there's a discrepancy from contract versus TFPC, but that's my understanding.
You're right, Derek. There is a lot of added costs that aren't captured by TIP funding. We have a few different categories, and that total construction cost includes a lot of other things that aren't usually picked up in the TIP cost. So they are different sometimes, but yeah, we do defer to the TIP cost for that.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Pat. Thanks, Schuster. Thanks, Brian. Any other questions on the amendment?
I just one question,
ahead,
and
Karen.
I think I heard it. So largely the reason for the increase is the need to widen. Is that what it was, to widen for utilities? Just want to make sure I heard it correctly.
Yeah, originally the design was going to close the roadway altogether. And I think that from various feedback that the designers received, they needed to keep that roadway open, and they're going to use one-way alternating traffic. So by just the general idea of opening up the roadway and allowing traffic to go through, we found a few areas, especially where utility conflicts were, where they needed to widen, and that increased the cost to that degree. So it was really kind of a change of design in a way to kind of accommodate traffic better.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just
Schuster.
Yeah, Chair, thank you. Just one thing to note, we did receive what's called a standard operating procedures 940 email from the project manager explaining in detail some of the reasoning for cost increase on this project. I will make sure to forward that along to Blake so that at the time of its release for public comment, that context is present. I'm sorry if that got lost in the mix, Blake.
Thank you, Derek.
Thank you. Anything else?
I just wanted to note, so we're looking at a May 15 public hearing on this, with close of public comment being on May 16, so that we can wrap that up and present it to the NMMPO on our May 22nd meeting.
Okay, great. Thanks, Kelly. Perfect. All right, well, with that, I think we can look for a motion in second. So this would be to release for public comment the cost increase as described, and just want to note this is for project number 609035. I think the number there is missing a zero. So 609035, just Westford project cost increase. I'll ask for a motion in second to release this for public comment.
So moved.
Okay, second.
All right, moved by Jane and seconded by Pat. Go ahead and call the roll, Kelly.
All right, Derek Cravat,
Yes.
Brian Fallon,
Yes.
Jane Wellman,
Yes.
Pat Wochus,
Yes.
Tom Bommel,
Yes.
Karen Bulio,
Yes.
motion approved.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Move on to the next item, which is fiscal year 2025 to 2029 Transportation Improvement Program. Propose release this for public comment. So turn it back to staff to walk through the next tip.
Okay, great. Thank you, Derek. So we have sent to all of you a proposed draft tip for 2025 through 2029. I just want to pull out some important elements of that document here for you today. And then at the end of this presentation, we'll be asking the NMMPO to vote to release this for public comment. So we have a public hearing that would be scheduled for May 8th to hear from the public regarding any questions or comments on the tip. So what I want to walk through just real quickly is project prioritization, equity, and how we've evaluated or analyzed equity as part of this tip document, the overall tip financial plan, and then a reminder of the projects that are programmed for this next 5-year period, and then the public participation process moving forward after today. So if we can go to the next slide. So this is really just a reminder, in evaluating projects for the TIP, we use our transportation evaluation criteria, and scores range from -18 to +18. We have all of the projects scored that are considered or proposed for this TIP. That said, as we mentioned last month, we did not score any projects this year as there were no new or substantially different or advanced projects, other than what had been proposed in prior years. So this is basically the tech scores for the projects that are currently proposed on the tip. This is also shown in page 58 of the draft document. So if you want to take a look at that, that's where you can find that additional information. Next page. Regarding equity, the TIP document outlines a number of ways that we evaluate equity or analyze projects for equity. One of those ways is looking at regional equity. So understanding how projects are represented across the region, and how funding, basically how that TIP funding is allocated per capita per year. When you look at this, you can see that, Pepperell and Tingsboro over the past 15 years, or over the past 10 years, and then incorporating the projects proposed for this next 5-year TIP, have not had any projects listed on the TIP. And so that suggests to us that perhaps there's a way that our organization and the NPO can work more directly with those communities to advance projects for the TIP. And with that in mind, we do see a large amount of money going to Lowell, but I think that brings into mind another way that we want to, or that we can consider, or we can analyze for equity in the TIP development process. So if we go to the next page, we can think about equity as well, as far as how funding is distributed by environmental justice population. So with that in mind, if you go to, I believe that's page, sorry, it's in the bottom right corner there. If you go to page 43 of the document, you can see how we analyze these projects, and there's further explanation in the document, which you may want to take a look at, how we analyze these projects for equity regarding populations or households that make lower than or 65% or less than median household income across the region, communities that have a high or 25% or greater non-English speaking population. So we're looking at communities with high immigration rates, looking at communities where there is a higher minority population than elsewhere in the region. So this is another way that we want to think about equity, is making sure that people who have lower incomes or are non-English speakers, or who may otherwise not have equitable participation in a public process, have equitable representation in the kind of projects that we are funding across the region. We also looked, as you can see on the next slide, Blake with Carlin, our GIS manager, did an analysis using the Title VI equity analysis guidelines. And so this is looking at, again, our definitions of 65% of household income, median household income. So looking at mapping out where households that make a lower income reside across the region, comparing that with the 33 projects that had been programmed between 2015 and 2024, and then comparing those projects with the proposed projects for the 2025 to 2029 TIP, and understanding, are we moving toward greater equity for environmental justice populations in our next 5 years than we had been pursuing, or than we had been achieving in our prior 10-year period. What that analysis does show is that as you get closer to a TIP funding to population ratio of 1.0, as you can see in this bottom slide here, when you get closer to 1, and as that number gets lower, there's actually less equity in the distribution of funding. And this is further explained. I think this is really well explained on page 47 through 49 of the document. So I invite you to take a look at that. What that does suggest to us, again, is how we start to work with our communities to advance projects to the TIP in the next coming years. And one of the reasons, the primary reason for this dip that we can understand, is that the work bridge was really helping to balance out that equity analysis, because it was really highly beneficial to populations in Lowell, which when we look at Lowell, we have a higher environmental justice population in Lowell than we do in some of our other communities. And that was a significant project. So there may be ways that in the coming years, we want to take a look at either multiple smaller projects that advance equity for our EJ populations, or we might want to look at one large project that will do the same, and just sort of balance out access to improvements across the region. If we go to the next slide, this basically maps out the improvements between the last 10 years and as proposed for the next 5. Click again. these are the projects that are proposed or that were approved under scenario 1 that the MPO approved at our meeting last month. These again are on page 44 to 45 of the TIP document. Next slide. Finally, this is on page 58 of the draft TIP document, but this really shows how we, under the approved scenario by the MPO, how we are operating within a fiscal constraint. And the scenario that was endorsed by the MPO at our last month's meeting did really do probably the best job in allocating our annual funding over the next 5 years to make sure that we're taking advantage of the allocation. This next slide shows what was also approved for the LRTA. And this again is on page 59 of the TIP document. So going to the next slide, these are the projects that the MPO approved last month and how they spread out over the next 5 years. And again, you can see at the bottom here, this is how the projects are sort of meeting or matching our fiscal constraint and how we've AC'd these projects over the next couple of years where necessary in order to make sure that we're taking the greatest advantage of our funding. When we look at those on the next slide, we're also inserting the state-funded projects. So this includes projects that are funded on the state TIP, including projects in Westford, Bill Ricker, the Yankee Doodle Bike Path, Westford Bridge Rehabilitation, Drigget Englesby School, and then a project in 2029 with Tewksbury. There is not a project in the state TIP under the other scenario. We did have a project that was in Chelmsford that the MPO voted to approve to be moved to our local TIP. So that's maybe part of the reason for a gap in projects that are state funded in that period is because we are pulling that onto our local TIP under this proposed document. And then the next slide shows as approved or as endorsed by the MPO last month, how that funding is allocated to the LRTA as well. We can go to the next. Yeah, so the next steps here is that we are requesting the MPO to vote to release this document for public comment. Should you vote to do that today, the public comment period would begin tomorrow and would go through May 16. We have a meeting scheduled, a virtual public meeting scheduled for May 8 at 5:30 p.m. And so this would be an opportunity to present and hear comments from the public. And then after the 16th, after the close of that public comment period, we'll develop a response to the public comments, make any necessary revisions to the TIP, and we'll present that to you for adoption at the May 22 meeting.
Great. Thank you, Kelly. Any questions for Kelly on the TIP? I had one question. There was one of the slides had a line in the table called unprogrammed reserve. I was just curious what that was referring to. Yeah, that one there, where it says 0. Does that just mean there's like, you don't want to put anything there just to like preserve in case of cost increases or something like that?
Yeah, I tried to remember that was actually from our scenario analysis, and you're asking me to remember 2 months ago. Which is
okay.
Yeah. I think that's probably a little confusing, and I don't think it's necessary to include in the actions.
Oh, great. Okay. Yeah, just curious if it was like if it meant something different but that's fine. Yeah.
We're introducing new language to the federal process.
Oh yeah, no worries. That sounds good. Are there any other questions on the TIP? All right, with that, I'll then ask for a motion and second to release the draft 2025 to 2029 Transportation Improvement Program out for public review and comment.
So moved.
Second.
All right, go ahead and call the roll, Kelly.
Okay, Derek Cravat?
Yes.
Brian Fallon?
Yes.
Jane Wellman?
Yes.
Pat Wojcik?
Yes.
Tom Bomo?
Yes.
Karen Pulio?
Yes.
Okay, motion approved. Thank you. And we will follow up with a direct invite to that meeting on the 8th. And then we'll be following up with you all again on the 22nd. So thank you.
All right, great. Thank you, Kelly. And yeah, thank you for the TIP presentation. I know it's always a lot of work to put that together, so I appreciate the collaboration with you all on that, and looking forward to reviewing that and getting you all feedback over the next few weeks. Great. So I think I have the next agenda item, which is on the statewide long-range transportation plan. We're calling Beyond Mobility. So this is a planning process that we're going through right now at MassDOT to develop what's going to be a strategic plan for the agency. It's a really important guiding document for us as we look to kind of the next generation of transportation investments in the Commonwealth. You can go to the next slide. I'm presenting here today and at all the MPOs this month because the plan is currently out for public review and comment. It's posted on our website, the mass.gov/beyond-mobility page, where you could view the full plan. It's open until May 31st. That last bullet is slightly out of date. We actually recently extended it. So apologies for not passing along, but yeah, we have extended. We got requests to extend it because the plan is a bit long. It's about 160 some odd pages, but there's also a summary, executive summary on the website that condenses it and is certainly more digestible. So we encourage folks to check that out. But we wanted to just present here today just to give you all a sense of what's in the plan and get the word out and ask that you, of course, feel free to spread the word to anyone you might think is interested. So next slide. The plan is part of a larger kind of initiative we have going on at MassDOT called MassDOT at 15. I believe the secretary may have alluded to this last month when she chaired this meeting, but we have a lot going on right now with Beyond Mobility being one, but the agency turns 15 years old this year. We formed officially in 2009 as a unified agency from Mass Highway, the Turnpike Authority, Registry. We all kind of became one unified agency. And so this plan represents kind of sort of where we are now at 15 years and where we are going into the future. So it's kind of the vision for the future of transportation and is an important part of this larger MassDOT at 15 initiative that our leadership is kind of using as a strategic direction for the agency. And the other pieces of it are the strategic business plan, which will define kind of workforce needs and staffing levels that we need, especially with new bipartisan infrastructure law funding and sort of the need for larger benches of projects and things like that, what we need from a staffing standpoint to deliver that. And the third component on the next slide is the Transportation Funding Task Force, which folks may have heard of. This is something the governor has developed and has appointed our secretary to chair. And this is a group that's going to meet monthly over the next year and make recommendations to the governor on how to pay for a lot of the improvements that we know need to happen and how funding might be used to implement some of the actions that are included in the Beyond Mobility plan. Next slide. So with respect to the kind of process here, Beyond Mobility kind of lives in that top box under strategic direction and planning, where we establish things like goals and performance measures, trends, targets, and we work with, of course, all of the MPOs and municipalities to actually implement a lot of what's in the plan. So we're kind of establishing a framework. It's going to serve to restructure our capital investment plan, which you'll hear more about, I think, in the next item. We will have a presentation on our capital plan as well. But it will help to kind of set the stage for an update of that plan. But of course, it does not exist in a vacuum, right? We work with all the MPOs, with municipalities and others to actually program projects like the ones included on the tip that we just released, and other initiatives at the regional and municipal level. So just wanted to emphasize that this is, of course, a collaborative process, and Beyond Mobility is kind of at that strategic planning level. Next slide. But we really wanted this plan to be informed directly by people and public engagement. So we talked to over 5,000 people in the development of this plan, either through surveys, events like the one shown on the screen here, where we kind of went out and promoted the survey at our booth across the state. And we really wanted to hear about people's challenges and vision for the future, specifically when it comes to transportation. Next slide. And some of the responses we heard back, which I'm sure probably come as no surprise and are probably very similar to what was in the regional transportation plan here, was that there's a huge interest in the ability to get around without a car. I think, people are of course frustrated with congestion, but, emphasize that. And some of the other interesting responses had to do with better bicycle and pedestrian connections to transit stations and stops, better wayfinding near transit stations, more frequent bus and commuter rail service, and more passenger rail options also emerged as kind of key themes throughout. Next slide. But like I said, that's just a sample of high-level themes. We heard from over, again, 5,000 folks, and we felt like everything we heard fell under the umbrella of one of these 6 priority areas shown on the screen now. And these kind of serve to structure the overarching, the plan. And you can see safety, reliability, which refers to kind of, in this context, travel time of being able to predict how long it will take you to get around, clean transportation, destination connectivity, resiliency, and travel experience, and social and geographic equity, and financial and staffing resources. We're considering cross-cutting themes that underlie all 6 areas. But these 6 we felt like really encapsulate what we heard from people and what we've studied in our analysis of the transportation system. So in the plan, each of these 6 areas has its own vision statement, a set of value statements, information about key facts and problem statements that really emerged as issues for each of these areas, and then a set of action items that correspond directly to the problem statements themselves. So within the plan, again, we have over 100 action items across these 6 areas. And the next few slides here just give you a sample of what those actions are. So with respect to safety, one of our highlighted problem statements among many others, but this one here is a crucial one that I think is representative of a lot of what we heard and what we've studied in our analysis, is that we know that crashes, and particularly bicycle and pedestrian crashes, are really disproportionately located in environmental justice communities. Some of the numbers are really eye-popping, like 142 of the top 200 crash clusters for pedestrians are in EJ communities. We hear a lot about safety concerns in our gateway cities and other more disadvantaged areas. And so we know it's a huge problem. It's a statewide issue across all of our communities. And so we need to I think do more to address this. And so one of our action items here is to work with municipalities to really build a bench of projects that address safety concerns in these areas, and make sure we're dedicating a program in our capital plan to address these safety concerns. Right now, we have kind of a general safety improvements program, but we don't have one that's specifically about improvements in areas where we know there's a higher number of crashes and disproportionately high crashes. So that's something we'll be recommending in this plan, and using the CIP kind of restructure to develop. With respect to reliability, our quantified problem statement here is that through a technique or method we use called a planning time index, we looked at travel times across different times of day, and during peak periods, people have to plan for commutes taking up to 8 times longer than they do during kind of free flow travel time. So there's definitely a sense that we're at a bit of a crisis point, I think, when it comes to things like congestion and delays on transit. And so some of our action items here have to do with improved coordination between our highway division and transit agencies to look at where we can maybe improve transit frequency, whether that's bus frequency or sort of commuter rail, passenger rail, subway service, et cetera, in areas that we know we might be able to more, people might be more inclined to shift from single occupancy vehicles to transit, and also look at transit priority infrastructure on roadways. Right now, a lot of highway projects happen, without that sort of transit coordination. So that's something we're kind of emphasizing in this plan. And also looking at things like congestion pricing. This is coming up as part of the task force as well, that, they're just to understand what all of the tools at our disposal are when it comes to kind of raising revenue and addressing things like congestion. So just a starting point reference in the plan for something like that as a follow-on. Next slide. On clean transportation, we know transportation is the biggest contributor of transportation related emissions. And again, these emissions are disproportionately located in environmental justice communities. And so there's been a ton of work done on this topic and on electrification through the Clean Energy and Climate Plan with Energy and Environmental Affairs, our state agency partners, as well as the Climate Chiefs report in Massachusetts that came out last fall. So there's been a lot of work done on this topic already. We're just restating those electrification targets in Beyond Mobility, not trying to reinvent the wheel there, but certainly referencing MassDOT's commitment to advancing those. And also we have in our values section that truly achieving our climate goals requires a multi-pronged solution that goes beyond just electrification and really emphasizes the need for mode shift, getting people sort of more and out from car trips into transit and into or I guess onto walking and biking modes. So that's something we're emphasizing in the plan. And then we're calling for a study here that would look at where we might be able to work with municipalities to look at things like land use and zoning reform, especially in areas outside the MBTA service area, because I think a lot of this work is ongoing with the MBTA Communities Law and 3A Zoning Act changes, but we're looking at things like with East-West Rail happening and other kinds of passenger rail initiatives. Where are there areas along that route that might need more transit-oriented or housing or development to really encourage that kind of reform? So that's something we're studying and proposing to study further through this plan. Next slide. On destination connectivity, again, an area we heard a lot on, just people feeling like the system is a bit fragmented and needing more infrastructure to connect to critical opportunities, including transit. And we studied kind of where there are gaps in the network and actually learned that environmental justice areas have fewer planned bicycle and pedestrian facilities than other parts of the state. And so that's something we were looking to build a bunch of projects on as well. And our action item has to do with, again, similar to the safety concern, kind of prioritizing a list of projects that promote that multimodal connection between areas that we know are more disadvantaged and transit and other critical destinations. And we have an ongoing analysis in our planning office at MassDOT called the Next Gen Bike and Pedestrian Vision Initiative, which looks at gaps in the sidewalk network and protected bicycle facility network statewide. And we're looking at areas close proximity to transit stations and stops as part of that network to really look at where we should be building that bench of projects. So, and formalizing those projects in a capital plan program. So that's again going to be a big part of our CIP restructure that flows from the priorities articulated in this plan. Next slide. On resiliency, in the plan we quantify the number of roadway miles and transit infrastructure that's at risk of flooding at varying levels of flooding and of sea level rise. So we know that there's significant infrastructure at risk here and as vulnerable. So again, this is an area where there's been a lot of work done through, there's a plan called Resilient Mass, again, led by EEA, that really already assigns MassDOT and our partner agencies a lot of resiliency related actions to be taken, including developing vulnerability assessments and things like that. But one new action item we have here is to look at us supporting at MassDOT projects that come through other programs like the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Program, which is a program run by EEA. But we, of course, have dedicated resiliency funding at MassDOT that might be able to support unfunded project applications through the MVP program. So just looking at ways to collaborate there and take that kind of whole of government approach to tackling the climate crisis and making sure we're using the resources we have and I guess avenues of projects being submitted and funded. Next slide. This is the last slide, just on the last priority area here called travel experience, where this refers to just the general ease and comfort of using the system and getting around. Something we heard a lot, especially from people with disabilities and people not speaking English as a first language, is a need for improved wayfinding signage and more traveler information to assist with things like understanding options, especially when it comes to things like medical transportation or things that might not be immediately accessible through tools like Google Maps, right? Like if there are services people might qualify for, things like that. So there's a whole lot of work our Rail and Transit Division is doing on this to look at community transportation and regional mobility coordinators, things like that. But our action item here is to call for a study that would inventory bus stops and transit stations statewide and look at kind of the level of accessibility there, the sort of presence of things like wayfinding, signage, and other information, and really look at where there might be gaps in what the community needs are based on demographic data and what is actually there. So something we know is a need and something we're going to be studying further as a result of this. So next slide, I think this is the last one. Just wanted to again emphasize this is currently out for public review and comment until May 31st, and definitely encourage folks to check out the plan, send us comments. There's a comment form on our website, which I will put into the chat. Yeah, appreciate anyone's interest and ability to spread the word for us. So thank you. And I'm happy to take any questions as well. Any questions? No.
I have a question.
Oh,
No, I got
yeah,
one.
go ahead, Jane. Yeah.
So I heard a little bit about this, I think last week, in the news grabbing headline was tolls on 93. Are we talking about kind of the same, that's that financial piece that we were talking about?
Yeah, it's really about the funding task force had mentioned that, and that's something, yeah, of course, the governor has come out and clarified that that's not actually something that is going to be looked at as part of the task force. I think our secretary had made some comments that have since been clarified there. But yeah, in general though, congestion pricing is more of something that is I think going to be studied further, but to be determined kind of how that will look. Yeah.
My concern with the congestion pricing is, and I assume this analysis will be done, is how that affects income levels. So are low income folks going to be paying that higher rate, and how will that be addressed? So those are some of my concerns. But I think it's a great project. I really appreciate your presentation, and the layout of it is easy to understand, and I have it up on the website here. So I appreciate all that, Derek, and I look forward to digging into it and spreading it around in our communities. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jane. And yeah, great point. That's definitely something we'll be exploring as a next step and accounting for that. Jenny?
Thanks, Derek. I'm excited about this plan and really appreciate how the state is looking at linking transportation to climate resiliency and hardening our infrastructure, and also looking at mobility more broadly. Of course, you've been doing that for a long time, but I can really see that it's different in the way that it's being communicated, and I appreciate that. I was curious, and I did look at the website, but I was curious if there's any way to drill down on survey results to get information about our region and who responded from our region. I didn't see it on the website, but I'm just curious as a follow-up if that's possible. I think we would be interested in knowing what people in our region are talking about. I mean, of course, we just did Envision 2050, but it's always helpful to get any additional background information or current information even about what people are thinking about mobility.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, that's a great point. And it might have been just before you started, because we started the outreach for this. It's been going on for a little while. I think it's like maybe a year or a year and a half ago we started the outreach. So yeah, we do actually have survey results that have zip code in the data, so we can definitely provide that to you. And you can of course use that to filter for responses in the region. Other questions? All right, great. Well, thank you, everyone. Appreciate the feedback there. We can move on to our next item, which is the 2025 to 2029 capital investment plan development. Also a MassDOT presentation. I believe we have Michelle Scott here, yep, our manager of capital planning at MassDOT. I'll turn it over to Michelle.
Thank you, I suppose.
You're muted, Michelle.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Could you confirm the presentation's showing up in slideshow mode for me?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. So thank you, everyone, for your time this afternoon. My name is Michelle Scott. I'm the manager of capital planning at MassDOT, and want to share a little bit about our upcoming capital investment plan and its relationship to the CIP, the STIP and the Northern Middlesex MPO's TIP. Okay. Just advancing this here. All right. So the MassDOT CIP, just as a quick overview, much like the STIP and the individual MPO TIPs around the Commonwealth, is our rolling 5-year plan for supporting capital investments, includes planning, construction, and capital maintenance. And this includes a wide variety of modes and transportation networks, not only roads, bridges, and transit, but also our statewide freight and passenger rail network, public use airports, facilities, and services provided by the Registry of Motor Vehicles and other MassDOT enterprise services. The diagram on the right-hand portion of the slide shows the major framework and priority areas that we use to organize the CIP. As in recent cycles, these include 3 major priority areas: reliability, modernization, and expansion. The first of which really supporting a state of good repair, the second supporting safety upgrades and improvements that make the system more accessible and more supportive of economic growth and vitality, and the expansion category, which really refers to expansion of multimodal options, including passenger rail services in the statewide bicycle and pedestrian network. So to advance these different priority areas, we have a series of CIP programs. These essentially function as buckets or set-asides for funding to advance individual projects in each category. So to support the CIP, we have funding from a wide variety of sources. Again, like the STIP and the TIPS, we do reflect federal funding for transportation investments coming from the different modal administrations. This includes formula funding as well as funding coming from competitive grant processes. MassDOT continues to compete very aggressively for those and work with MPOs and municipalities to do so as well. As funds come to MassDOT as awards, they get incorporated into the CIP. On the state side, we have a number of sources as well. State bond cap refers to the general obligation bond proceeds that support capital investments for the different Commonwealth agencies and are allocated by the Executive Office for Administration and Finance. An important function of these dollars is providing a match to federal funding, particularly on the highway side. Also have a number of special obligation bonds that support projects like the Accelerated Bridge Program and Next Generation Bridge Program. We also receive revenues from the tolled facilities to support investments, the infrastructure for those facilities and networks, and a host of other municipal, local, and other sources. So the slide here covers the rough proportion of these different capital investment areas within the overall CIP. So the boxes in green highlight content that overlaps with what's included in the STIP, including federal aid funded projects, both selected at MPO and TPO discretion, as well as projects selected through MassDOT, as well as the state match for federal funds that come to the RTAs for transit projects. The items in blue highlight the other different categories that I referenced on the previous slide, including Chapter 90 and other local aid funding. So as you can see, given the relative size of the STIP investments, it really is an important overall component of our CIP. And so the decisions that are made in each region throughout the state definitely have important influences on our program. Want to do a little bit of comparing and contrasting between the CIP and the STIP to highlight some important shared features and differences. They're both 5-year plans as highlighted in that red box in the middle of the screen. Both documents follow the reliability, modernization, and expansion framework that I referenced. As you, particularly on the highway side, investments are also organized in common CIP programs. Both documents are subject to fiscal constraint, both in terms of federal funding and some of the other funding sources that I referenced. And they're shaped by the same kind of project and program development forces. For example, needs identified both within MassDOT, within the regions, and by the public, shaped by information coming out of asset management systems, project scoring processes, both at the MassDOT and NPO and TPO levels, and of course, project readiness. All of these factors influence what can ultimately be included in the capital investment plan. Some key differences, the CIP does follow a state fiscal year timeline instead of a federal fiscal year one. And another important distinction is that the CIP is what we call a cash flow document that reflects spending over the life of a project, whereas the STIPs and the TIPs show the point at which federal funds are obligated, and in other words, a commitment being made by federal agencies to fund the project, which for highway projects usually happens when they're advertised. So if you're looking at the two documents side by side, you may see that some projects may show up later in the CIP than they do in the STIP. That's because they're reflecting when spending is actively starting, which is usually a couple months after projects are advertised. And you'll see that spending kind of over the life of the project until it's closed out. So I want to talk a little bit about our upcoming fiscal year 25 through 29 CIP, and highlight some major influencing factors which we've sorted into external and internal categories. On the external side, we continue to respond to the ongoing implementation of the bipartisan infrastructure law, including both expanded formula funding, the creation of new formula programs like carbon reduction and protect, as well as the increase in the number of competitive grant opportunities that are available. Of course, the Commonwealth available sources and decisions that are made at the governor and legislature level are also influencing what we can incorporate into our CIP. Of course, evolving travel demands and factors influence both decisions about investments, as well as in some cases our revenues in the case of the tolls revenues for capital, for example. Of course, partner agency processes, as I've alluded to, also influence the capital plan along with public feedback on our process. Internally, we're responding to the priorities of the Healy-Driscoll administration, including an expanded focus on climate. In his prior presentation, Derek talked a lot about the Beyond Mobility Plan and its context within the overall MassDOT at 15 initiative. Our fiscal year 25 to 29 plan is already starting to adapt to some of the priority areas that are put forth in Beyond Mobility, but what you'll see over the coming cycles is a real realignment of the CIP to align with Beyond Mobility's priority areas and action steps. And of course, some of the other items I alluded to, asset management planning, modal planning, and performance management also influence our CIP. So within that priority framework I mentioned earlier, featuring reliability, modernization, and expansion, MassDOT also pursues shorter-term strategic goals from cycle to cycle. These are important focus areas for our plan coming up, including safety, climate stewardship, asset management to support safe and reliable travel, and partnerships with municipalities. Of course, we continue to try to advance social and geographic equity across all our investment areas as we're developing the CIP. So this slide covers an overall timeline. As you can see, the bars for each of these steps for developing the CIP are fairly long. This is because the CIP is a really iterative process and involves kind of interaction and refinement with different partner agencies, and of course through the development of the STIP and the decisions that are made at the NPO and TPO level. Starting last fall, we've moved through the stages of setting strategic priorities, revisiting our investment programs, and identifying new projects. We have begun and continue to refine our understanding of available funding sources, are kind of in that final stage of selecting investments and developing our draft plan. We expect the MassDOT Board of Directors will approve the release of the plan for public comment in mid-May, kicking off a 21-day public review and comment period that'll run concurrently with that for the STIP, with the hope of adopting a final plan this June. This slide provides a snapshot of our anticipated CIP as of April 2024. Because we have a number of weeks left in the process, you know, these values are subject to change, but show you kind of the overall trajectory of our program. As that table in the bottom right-hand corner shows, we have planning for an approximately $16 billion plan. The table at the top organizes that spending by division and major priority areas. As you can see from that donut chart in the bottom left-hand corner, we're expending approximately 57% overall on reliability investments and another 27% on modernization investments. Just some quick highlights on investments for each of the focus areas that I've referenced. You know, as I alluded to in the previous slide, approximately 13.5 billion, or roughly 84% of overall spending, is directed towards reliability and modernization, really focusing in on those safety and asset management focus areas that I mentioned. The boxes on the slide highlight a couple of investments, highlights for individual modes, including an estimated 5.4 billion for improving bridges throughout the Commonwealth, additional spending on roadway improvements, both in terms of interstate and non-interstate pavement and other roadway reconstruction and other upgrades, as well as investments for the state rail network, public use airports, and RTAs. For climate stewardship, we think about investments in 3 different areas. First, alternatives to car and truck travel, which we're supporting through over 500 million in investments for the state's bicycle and pedestrian facilities and shared use path network, supporting RTAs and the ongoing improvements to our state passenger and freight rail network. And this includes investments for South Coast Rail is being carried out by the MBTA. The electrification category includes investments for the NEVI program, National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure, which provides federal funds to roll out charging stations along major roadways in the Commonwealth, and additional funds for RTAs to make the transition from internal combustion to electric vehicles and have the supporting infrastructure to do that. On the resiliency side, there are resiliency-oriented elements integrated through projects throughout the CIP, but we do have a dedicated resiliency program for culvert and flood control projects, as well as ongoing planning support for climate adaptation. We want to, of course, highlight support for partnerships with municipalities. We have a number of continuing local aid programs included in the CIP, largest of which, of course, is Chapter 90. But also includes our Complete Streets program, our Shared Streets and Spaces program, and others amounting to approximately 1.35 billion for local aid. Just want to highlight a couple of investments for Northeastern Massachusetts. So these cover both Northern Middlesex and Merrimack Valley regions, but include investments like the Rourke Bridge replacement, similarly the Basileir Bridge work in Haverhill, as well as a variety of bicycle and pedestrian roadway improvements and support for the RTAs. So I just want to highlight some upcoming opportunities to react to our draft plan. As I mentioned, we're expecting to release it sometime in mid-May, kicking off an anticipated public comment period that'll run from May 16th through June 7th. There will be a number of ways to comment on the plan, including through public meetings that are being organized for regions throughout Massachusetts. I believe the one scheduled for the Northern Middlesex Merrimack Valley region is on May 30th, so please stay tuned for more details about that. But there'll be other kind of offline opportunities to provide your feedback as well. And again, just want to close out with that connection to Beyond Mobility. As Derek mentioned, there are a number of specific action steps that we'll be reviewing from Beyond Mobility that'll influence our future capital plans. And we're also doing the work to kind of overall reorient the structure and major priorities that set our capital investments plan structure to align with the priority areas in Beyond Mobility. And that table on the right-hand portion of the slide highlights an example of how we'll do that with an example CIP investment program. So I thank you very much for your attention, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Great. Thank you, Michelle. Any questions for Michelle? Jenny?
I don't want to jump the line if there's a board member with a question. So sorry, I got excited there. But please, others.
Yeah, any questions from board members?
I just wonder if we could get a copy of that slide presentation. I didn't see one in our packet. I think it has a lot of good information.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Others? All right.
That was my question.
Don't see any. So Jenny, go ahead.
Great, thank you. And thank you for this presentation of both, of course, Beyond Mobility, and then now we're seeing the SIP. I just want to say, it's more of a statement, that everything that we can do with the Northern Middlesex Greater Lowell delegation to explain to them the importance of increasing revenue, especially for long-term capital funding needs, is critical right now. We don't have enough money to do all of the great things that we want to do, and that includes long-standing capital needs, just basic, like baseline sort of activities that we need to do for safety purposes to be compliant. But to do anything bigger or bolder beyond that, we need long-term capital funding. So anybody who is participating in this conversation today should contact their legislator and help to encourage the thoughtful forward thinking that we need more funding to support MassDOT and all of the great things that we want to do in the future, because without more capital funding, we can't do it. So I see a great plan here, but I also see things that are missing that I think we all talk about in Greater Boston and beyond. And I hope that we can do those things, but I also know that it's a highly constrained financial plan. And anything that we can do at NMCOG as part of the MPO to encourage greater funding to serve this purpose is something that we should be doing. So I just wanted to make that statement. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jenny? Any other questions or comments? All right. Thank you, Michelle. Appreciate your time here. Move on to our next item, which is the fiscal year 2025 Unified Planning Work Program development. Turn it back to staff on this one.
There we go. Jenny, do you want to start this one off?
Yeah, I'll kick this off.
Okay.
All right. And then I'll hand it over to you. Okay.
Sounds good.
All right. So we are. Are we all set? Okay. So I'm kicking this off just to talk about the sort of some of our preferred activities today, but we'll also give you kind of a bigger picture overview. In looking at both and in the discussion with our federal partners during our certification review process, we received a lot of different types of feedback about MPO tech activities and ways to improve our communications, our engagement, and tighten up the work that we do within the agency in a variety of ways. And a lot of the work in the agency is communicated through the UPWP. And how we communicate that can be difficult to navigate, and in part because sometimes we don't have enough discrete tasks and with clear deliverables. So we are looking at, and if you can go to the next slide, please, we're trying to also align the UPWP this year, of course, more clearly with the Envision 2050 plan, which was adopted in this past year. And that means kind of resetting where we're at to make sure that we're achieving these bigger, broader goals, and also using clear metrics that demonstrate how we're achieving those goals and measuring progress, but also a remapping of the UPWP document altogether. If you go to the next slide, that means sort of a little bit of a rearrangement of things. And so we've started to map this out, and I'm just sharing this for the purpose of that. By the time you get a draft document for your next meeting, you'll notice that it will look slightly different. It won't look as it has in the past with a long list of activities and many, many different tasks, but rather a more centered document that is advancing these seven goals that are on the screen here. The first one being, of course, the management of the process. The second focused on communications and engagement, which also includes how we communicate data that we gather, and also being compliant with many elements of our transportation planning activities. It also includes various plan updates that we might need to do in coordination with changing performance measures or other things that might change over time, and also implementing existing plans. It will also mean that we'll do better monitoring of the transportation network. Again, things that we already do, but just making it clear that it's under specific buckets or umbrellas of activities. So that includes things like our traffic counting program, even trail counting, other activities that basically monitor progress that we're making across the region with our network, or gaps that might also appear, and then how we would address those in the future. Also advancing infrastructure improvement projects that's part of the TIP, and anything that we can do as an agency to support those things, but in coordination with our communities, but also working more closely with our district offices on those activities as well. And then long-range interdisciplinary planning. This is the bulk of the work that NMCOG and MPO staff work on, but clarifying exactly what those discrete tasks are and what deliverables will actually occur over the course of 1 year, which is what we have in our UPWP. And then last, but definitely not least, is strengthening our regional transit system. As we just heard in the two prior presentations from MassDOT staff, it's really important to look beyond cars for some solutions, and that includes, of course, our work with the LRTA, but also other transportation entities like UMass Lowell, MEVA, MBTA, and more, and to ensure that connectivity and that things are making sense across the system. And then again, like in the monitoring activity, identifying the gaps and working to address those issues as well. So I'll now hand it over to you, Kelly, and you can walk through the more details as well as some of the projects that we've identified as preferred in the upcoming plan. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Jenny. So again, as Jenny mentioned, I think management of the 3C process is really an overarching thing, and that's why that was at the center of the diagram in the last slide. And that really relates to each of these other 6 tasks. So thinking about communications and engagement, this involves how do we talk about our work, how do we communicate our work, how do we make sure that we're translating this and getting that information to all of the people who live and work in our region, including translation and interpretation, ADA, civil rights, and then thinking about how we share our data and develop data dashboards that are accessible on our website. And as Jenny noted, I think a lot of this is really relating back to what we heard as part of the federal certification process. So we want to make sure that we're using our next UPWP both to address these things that we heard as part of FedCert review, but then also just maintain them and carry them forward. I think plan updates and implementation is pretty straightforward, but it's really maintaining and advancing those various plans that we've set forward. Monitoring the network, this is more of like a more immediate planning activity, which is like we're collecting that data, we're sharing that data, we're making sure that that data informs decision-making going forward. 5 is really where we wanted to, no, that's okay. This is advancing infrastructure projects, so we can go to the next one. Okay. So we have 2 key studies that we're proposing as part of the next UPWP. This is based on what we've heard in our communities, from our communities as well. So the first would be to do a more extensive study of Route 129. We have heard from staff in the towns of Chelmsford and Billerica about perhaps a conflict or maybe like a high conflict intersection. This has also come up as part of our Safe Streets and Roads for All project, is the dangerous conditions at the intersection of Route 129 and Brickhill Road. And so really doing a further study, including a traffic signal warrant analysis, understanding the various users of this roadway and ways that we can improve safety and just overall improve conditions of the infrastructure as trucks and vehicles and pedestrians and bikes and everybody is moving from these we're UPS, from freight at UPS, and then thinking about how people are accessing or moving past Route 3. The second case study that we're looking at, that we're evaluating as part of our next UPWP would be to advance a project that's on our current UPWP. That project is studying an intersection in Dracut at Bridge and Aiken. As part of working on this project or looking into this project, we realized that this needs to be expanded into a larger corridor study because just focusing on the intersection alone isn't really sufficient to address these sort of interdisciplinary issues along that corridor. So this would be a second project. And I think kind of going back to the way that we looked at projects, Dracut is really underrepresented in work that is coming onto our TIP. And so this is one way of working with that community to advance a project to get more of that TIP funding. And then on the next slide, just to continue, Jenny had mentioned these long-range interdisciplinary planning activities. These are really cross-cutting planning studies and activities that will be listed out in more detail in the draft TIP or the draft UPWP that you'll see next month. But thinking about ways that our work on economic development and housing and climate resilience all intersect with transportation. And on top of that, advancing more transportation-specific longer-range planning projects with our individual communities. And then, as Jenny mentioned, I think she described pretty well how we're strengthening our regional transit system. So this is working very closely with the LRTA, which is in relationship to our contract with the LRTA, but then also thinking about other transportation systems or transit systems that intersect with or overlap our transit network. Next slide. And so the process here, the timeline moving forward is that we'll be working on a draft UPWP that we'll be presenting to you next month. With your vote to release that for a public comment period, we'll have that public comment period open through June 21st. And then at the end of June, asking for a vote to endorse that. And then that would, in October, would become our functional UPWP for FY25. I think that's it.
Great. Thanks, Jenny and Kelly. Appreciate the presentation. Are there any questions or comments?
I have a question.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Kelly and Jenny, for the presentation. I'd just like to hear a little bit about how the Greater Lowell Vision Zero plan will be advanced as part of the UPWP next year. I know that this fall we'll have expended our funds for the SS4A program, and that leaves us with about a year of possibly an activity if we don't pursue another NOFO. So just thinking about ways that we'll keep on the pulse with our safety planning in our region.
Jenny, do you want to?
Yeah, it was a very fast passing of the slide. If we go back to the long range, we would include road safety audits and advancement of the Greater Lowell Safety Action Plan. That's the phrasing of it in here in this document, but it may have a different name, of course. Vision Zero Plan. That's what we will definitely be programming funds for those activities. Also with the possibility that we will also pursue a planning and demonstration grant, a second one, potentially by the September deadline. I'm hoping, I can't say that it is definitive, and I'm certain that MassDOT can't right now, but I'm hopeful that MassDOT will continue to support MPOs across the state in continuing to pursue these activities. It was discussed at the federal funding webinar yesterday, the Safe Streets and Roads for All grants and the upcoming deadlines. And and how MassDOT is supportive of those activities. And there is a requirement for a match in order to pursue those grants. So if we do pursue another grant, it would be great to have that support. If we do not have the support, then we will try to program it for UPWP. That is the intention right now.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jenny. Yep, that's helpful for us as well to understand the ins and outs there. Any other questions? All right, don't see any, so thank you. Yeah, great overview. I like how you set everything up, especially the link between kind of the long range plan and the UPWP. I think that's very clear, and perhaps that's a good segue into our next item here on federal certification. We have our federal partners with us to give us an update on the federal certification process. So turn it over to Joshua and Brandon.
Actually, we have a presentation that I just put into the folder. Sorry, Joshua and Brandon, we're just pulling this up for you.
Oh, no problem. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, no worries at all.
There we go.
All right, great. Yeah, well, thanks for, I know we got that to you just before here, so thanks for getting to that. But yeah, to start things off, hey everyone, my name is Brandon Burns and I'm with the Federal Transit Administration, and I'm also here today with Josh Barber from Federal Highways Administration, Massachusetts Division Office. And today we'd just like to provide an overview of the findings from the 2024 Federal Certification Review for the Northern Middlesex Metropolitan Planning Organization. Next slide, please. Yeah, so, oops, sorry. So the quick overview, the purpose of the certification review is to ensure that the metropolitan planning process is being carried out in accordance with applicable provisions of federal law. It's not just a review of the MPO, but the planning process conducted by all the agencies. This includes the state, MPO, and transit providers, who are charged with cooperatively carrying out the process on a daily basis. The review is a valuable opportunity to enhance the planning process and improve the quality of transportation investment decisions. And certification reviews are required by law for FHWA and FTA to jointly certify the Metropolitan Transportation Planning Process in Transportation Management Area, TMA. This is defined by an urban area with a population of over 200,000, and it shall be conducted every 4 years. So the components of the certification review include to build on and reflect ongoing oversight activities, and this includes review of planning documents and activities. For example, the UPWP, as we've been discussing, the TIP reviews and STIP findings. The process began with a desk review of planning products, and then we conducted a site visit, which occurred on February 8th of this year. And we also had a public comment session back in January of 2024. So the final report was issued on April 10th, and this summarized the review of findings. And next slide, please. So to jump into the findings, we'll first start off with the corrective actions. So the corrective actions, these are findings that must be addressed to comply with federal requirements within a time frame identified by the report. So the first finding was under the Transportation Improvement Program and Project Selection. So during the review, the federal team identified that the TIP should demonstrate financial constraint for a transit program that meets the requirement of 23 CFR, section 450. 326, paragraph K. And currently the TIP is programming transit discretionary funding that is not yet available or has not yet been awarded to the transit agency. A financial constraint shall be demonstrated and maintained by year and shall include sufficient financial information to demonstrate which projects are to be implemented using current and/or reasonable available revenues, while federally supported facilities are being adequately operated and maintained. So this corrective action should be addressed by September 30th, 2024. Next slide, please.
Thanks for that, Brandon. So the next corrective action we have is on public outreach and involvement. We're asking that the NMPO update their public participation plan to reflect their current practices and procedures, including virtual public involvement. And that should be in alignment with 23 CFR 450-316. And they should also specifically consider how the NMPO is going to improve outreach to Title VI communities and other underserved communities as defined in Executive Order 13985. This is we're hoping the NMPO can address this by next year. So we want to give you all some time to really reflect on the process, but also, I know MassDOT is currently updating their public participation plan, so just giving you all an opportunity for MassDOT to update their plan and you all to kind of absorb that and reflect on it in considering your update as well. Next slide, please. And then, And then the next one is in the area of civil rights. We're requesting that the NMPO develop a revised limited English proficiency plan, and that should fully address the 4-factor analysis and identify applicable safe harbor languages. And we're requesting that be conducted simultaneously with the NMPO's update of the public participation plan. So the same deadline about this time next year. And should also include updates to the NMCOG website to ensure language accessibility. Next slide.
Yep. Thanks, Josh. So the last corrective action, this is for performance-based planning and programming. And this was a result of the Metropolitan Transportation Plan missing baseline data that was excluded from the system performance report. So the federal team determined that the NMPO shall revise the MTP to include consistent and actual condition performance data with baseline data and targets from previously completed performance periods to determine if improvements were made and targets were achieved. This is required under 23 CFR 450.324, paragraph 4, F4. And similar to the tip finding, we would like this completed by September 30th of this fiscal year. And
so
sorry, go ahead, Josh.
Oh, sorry, Brandon. So we did have a few commendations that were identified through this process as well. This is areas where the NMPO is, considered to be enacting best practices, can serve as a national model for other NMPOs in the country. So the first one deals with the local technical assistance program. Specifically, the program, provides technical assistance for housing, planning assistance, and rezoning and updating housing production plans and master plans. So we thought the NMPO was really doing great work in the area of housing coordination. The other one was the NMPO's work with the local Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy Committee. Again, really just fantastic coordination on areas such as economic development, land use, housing, and transportation initiatives. Can really serve as a national model for other NMPOs. Next slide, please. So we had a few recommendations as well. These are areas that are not required for compliance with federal regulations and statutes, but rather just are areas where the federal team identified opportunities for improvement. The first one deals with the NMPO organizational structure, just requesting for the NMPO board and staff to consider as part of the next reaffirmation and review of the Memorandum of Understanding, just the overall organizational structure of the board, and the representation from smaller communities and environmental justice communities as well in your region. The next one deals with the Unified Planning Work Program, which has been talked about a bit already today, but just continuing their work on restructuring and reforming the work program with more discrete tasks, deliverables, reasonable timeframes for the completion of projects. and compliance with the amendment and adjustment procedures that are outlined in that work program. And in addition, NPO and LRTA staff should align their planning contract with the federal fiscal year and ensure the NPO support for the transit planning activities using those 5303 and 5307 funds that are transferred to the NPO is clearly documented and avoids redundancies across tasks and contracts.
Yeah, so a few more recommendations here. The first one was focused around the complete streets planning. So we noticed that over the last few UPWPs, they include a task for bicycle and pedestrian plan. So the federal team, we just recommended that the NPO should move forward with this task and try to make progress with adoption of a plan. So that was a recommendation for complete streets. Next up, the Metropolitan Transportation Plan. So as part of the next MTP update, the NPO should consider travel demand forecasting factors and conditions relevant to the region that could provide an objective assessment of transportation investment, assess a range of outcomes based on the change in assumptions, this including land use, population growth, and commuter patterns, and evaluate potential impact of transportation policies. The last, one more recommendation here is for the transportation improvement and project selection. And here we thought that the NPO should review their current transportation evaluation criteria as part of the tip to determine if updates are needed and to ensure they are consistent with the current goals and prioritization of the region. Next slide, please.
And then the last set of recommendations deals in the area of civil rights. So the NPO should conduct an ADA self-evaluation to determine the accessibility of the plans and programs to the public, and where necessary, institute new policies to ensure accessibility. And then also consider options to support local communities in advancing ADA compliance and transportation across the planning region. I recall, I think it was 7 out of the 9 communities in the region did not have ADA self-evaluations or transition plans in place. And it's an area where the NPO could provide a bit of support. In addition, just providing additional details and meeting notices to better help people with disabilities and the LEP community members understand what to expect at the meeting and be better positioned to request appropriate accommodations and support their engagement with the planning process as a whole. And then continuing to conduct comprehensive Title VI analyses, evaluating the benefits and burdens, not only of current transportation investments, such as in the TIP, but the existing transportation system as a whole. What is the distribution of access and multimodal facilities, et cetera, or what are the burdens, excessive traffic and speeding and safety issues across Title VI communities and EJ communities. Next slide.
Yeah, so to wrap things up here, just summary and next steps. So FHWA and FTA conditionally certified the transportation planning process of the Northern Middlesex NPO, and this was effective April 10th, 2024. So this was conditionally certified based off the 4 corrective actions for the TIP fiscal constraint, the public participation, the LEP and website update, as well as the MTP with the update with the performance-based planning. So as long as those are corrected by the dates of the end of the federal fiscal year of September 30th and a year from now for the public participation LEP updates, everything will be in good shape. Also, just to reiterate that there were many positive findings during the review, and I know a lot of great work came from the NPO, and there's great coordination, and it was we enjoyed the process, learning about all the activities going on in the region, and yeah, really commend them for the great work and outreach they did. So for next steps, over the next 45 days, probably by mid to early June, we'll work with the MPO to develop an action plan. And this would be to address those corrective actions and work on the recommendations that were identified during the review and included as part of the report. So not sure if there's any questions, or if Josh, if you'd like to add anything at this time.
Just thank you to the MPO staff and Jenny and Kelly for all the hard work you put into the review and your coordination. Thank you.
Thanks, Joshua and Brandon. Appreciate the overview there. Any questions for the federal team? Doug.
Hi, everybody. Doug Bruce with NMCOG here, member community Chelmsford. I had a question. I appreciate all the hard work that the staff put into this, and I appreciate the audit committee going through this. With respect to the commendations, is there a resource available that collects I'm sure the many commendations from the different audits that you do, say a collection or a resource of best practices that you recognize across the multiple audits that you've done? Does a resource like that exist, and is it available for reference?
I believe we do keep track of commendations, at least internally, nationwide. I'm not sure if that resource is publicly available, but I would be happy to look into it. Brandon, do you have any additional thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I know there's definitely an internal document for Brett.
From Volpe.
Yes, yeah, we'll follow up to see if we can confirm if we could share that. But yeah, something we'll look into and get that to you if that is the case. But great question.
All right, thank you very much.
Eric Schuster.
Yeah, I just wanted to note for Doug's question that other MPOs in the Commonwealth do receive certifications and may have commendations. In those circumstances, you can reach out to the transportation program managers from the respective regions, and I'm sure they'd be happy to furnish any praises that are being sung in their regions.
Yeah, I thought about that as we were going through the presentation. As I read the report, I was, going out to each one individually is certainly, relationship building. Let's call it that. But I was wondering if there was a central repository. So either way, I'm sure there's a way to get at the information. Thank you, Derek. And again, thank you to the whole audit committee. Appreciate your process and your feedback.
Thank you, Doug.
Great. Yeah. Okay. So just to be clear, while we have everyone here, I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. So the 2 corrective actions with a deadline of September this year. One of them, the MTP update, does require an amendment, right? So that's something that is going to have like a formal MPO action over the next few months, right? To edit or amend the current long-range transportation plan. Just want to confirm that we're all okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, probably my guess would be June. I know that timing is everything because of the deadline of September. So probably it would have to be June, given the other things that are on your docket, so to speak.
Right. Okay, great. Yep. And just want to make members aware too that that's something that will have to be in the form of an official action. So just to manage that expectation, and then the transit list, is that like, I mean, is it sufficient to handle that in future TIP cycles to just ensure that other discretionary projects are treated as such and we don't have any fiscal constraint? Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, just
okay.
moving forward, just to make sure that's corrected, and I know we will review that too. So
okay,
we can coordinate there.
Great. So in the 25-29 TIP, we'll just make sure it's compliant with the regulation, and in the action plan, we'll note that, and that'll be sufficient to resolve it. Okay. Just wanted to make 100% sure while we're all here what the path is to resolve it. Okay. Great. Any other questions? All right. Don't see any. Oh, Jenny. Yeah, go ahead.
Again, not a question, just a comment to our federal partners to say thank you for all of your work on this document, the report, and the the letter and all of the feedback that we received, positive and room for improvement. And we're eager to be in your good graces and to be doing things the way that we should be doing them and more. And always understand that there's always room for improvement at the same time. So we just appreciate the feedback and work together, and extend our thank you to the two of you and all of the other folks who attended the certification review meeting earlier this year. So just a thank you. And of course, also to MassDOT and the LRTA for also being there and continuing to be supportive throughout this process.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Jenny. All right.
And Dan, sorry, I also want to thank my staff because they did like everything to prepare for that review. So thank you very much to all of the team for being there. I know I said this previously, but since I just thanked others, thank you so much to everybody who's in that room. And those that I know that's not everybody, so other team members who participated and helped to answer questions and to do all the follow-up. Thanks, Derek.
Yeah, thank you, Jenny. Yeah, no, well done. No, it's a lot of work, so appreciate the collaboration there. All right, with that, we'll move on to other business. Is there any other business for the NMPO today? All right, I don't see any, so I will then ask for a motion and second to adjourn.
Let's do adjourn.
All right, okay, I heard a motion and second. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, I think without objection, we are adjourned. So thank you, everyone. We got a couple of important items next month too, so I'll see you back here in May, and have a great rest of your day. Enjoy
Thank you
the
so much.
nicer weather. Thank you. All right.
Thank you.
Bye
Thanks,
all.
everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.